Hello, my name is Jacob Todson, and welcome back to the Wisdom of Odin. Today, I'm in the land of endless winter, sweet rolls, hygge, and bicycles. But we're not here to discuss those things, maybe the sweet rolls a little bit. We're here to discuss what is contained within the Danish National Museum, which is one of the few representations of the Celtic god Cernunnos. And we're going to be discussing how he survived within history and how he's still surviving today. Now, before we head inside, we definitely need to discuss what survives when history. And this is going to be kind of an easy but also difficult conversation because there are no official written source materials from the ancient times that survive about Cernunnos. Now, we can discuss his name a little bit, especially as we get started, because I'm sure there's some people that are like already in the comments saying you are not saying that correctly. So I've been doing a little bit of research, and because the name Cernunnos comes from the Proto-Celtic, the C would be hard. Therefore, meaning Cernunnos, not Cernunnos. And I have said this so many different ways. I'm like, Cernunnos, Cernunnos. But it is Cernunnos, as far as I can tell. I'm sure there's people still in the comments saying you're not saying this correctly, but that is the problem of discussing ancient history that we know so little about, is there's going to be so many discrepancies, and especially when something is so wide and varied, because we're discussing something that was recorded by the Romans, but came from the Celtic people, but particularly the Gaulish people. And then we also are here in Denmark discussing him because one of the artifacts containing him was found in Denmark. And so we're talking about a wide span of the world, a long period of history that is mostly shrouded in mystery. But what actually survives? And so there are around 50 different votive shrines and or things that mention Cernunnos. Now, interestingly enough, even though I've seen this number 50 online, I've only been able to find a few of them, which leads me to believe that they are very small mentionings and there are a few famous ones. Obviously, the Gundestrup Cauldron contained within here, we're going to be talking about mostly in this video because I'm here in Denmark. However, the other most famous depiction is the Pillar of the Boatman, which is contained in Paris. Sadly, I wasn't able to visit there, but I'll put up some pictures for you. But this image gives us the name Cernunnos. And more interestingly, it's depicted on a pillar containing many different Roman deities, which shows that Cernunnos, despite being Celtic Gaulish in origin, played some significant role within the Roman belief system, or at least the Romans that existed in Gaul. Even though Cernunnos was more than likely a Gaulish deity, because of the Gundestrup Cauldron and that being possibly made in the east and then traveling up to Denmark, the possibility of Cernunnos being worshipped in a wider spread area is quite likely. Now, what about the individual aspects of him? All this is coming from what is featured within his votives. Typically, he is a horned god. He is holding a torque in one hand, a snake in the other, surrounded by wild things. Sometimes there is a bag of coins. Sometimes there's a horn of plenty, a cornucopia, and he is often cross-legged. From this, scholars have drawn conclusions for a long time, mainly associating him with the wilds because of the horns and the animals, but also some form of balance between civilization because of the torque and then the snake. Kind of the balance between the two. And then obviously the cross-legged thing we're kind of combining with our understandings of Eastern philosophy, which is balance, meditation, yoga. And so I think because of this, because we associate cross-leggedness typically with things like the Buddha, I think we're automatically combining this idea of being in balance with things. Now, is this incorrect? I don't think so. I think he is, when you look at an image of Cernunnos, the wild horns, torque, wild snake, cross-legged, it is really to look at him, the balance between the wilds and civilization. And considering the Romans were worshiping him, you can kind of see him possibly as something. So let's say the Romans come into your area and they replace your gods with Roman equivalents. Well, looking at something like Cernunnos as the balance between the two, the balancing key component between civilization and the wilds of the Celtic world, the Gaulish world. This is a deity the Romans would want to promote. Perhaps he was even created by the Romans to some way to subdue the beliefs of the Celtic people. And that's why he did survive in so many votive shrines. Much like the goddess Nehelenia, when it comes to different beings that survived within the Roman times, there was typically a reason. Now, this could have been the fact that they were popular to the people and they couldn't remove them, such as the goddess Sulis Minerva when it comes to Bath, England. She was so popular among the Celtic people, popular among the Romans that came there, that the name Sulis, Minerva, survived. And so Cernunnos could be this. He was so popular that he survived the Roman occupation of Gaul. But I think there is enough to argue that he was seen as the bridge between the Celtic and the Roman. One last thing before we actually venture inside here. When it comes to the modern resurgence of Cernunnos, and probably the reason you know about him is because of the horned god within Wiccan beliefs. And so within Wiccan beliefs, there's the masculine, the feminine, the lord, the lady, the sun, the moon, the horned god, the May Queen, green man, the May Queen. This reference of masculine wild, solar feminine, this is all stuff embedded in neo-paganism today, particularly when it comes to Wicca. And that is due to the fact of Margaret Murray in the 1800s, who was a folklorist talking about the horned god and kind of combining a lot of the masculine Celtic deities, a lot of the feminine Celtic deities into these two archetypes that were then later taken by Gerald Gardner and made into the Wiccan belief system that still survive today. And so because of the neo-pagan movements that roughly started in the 1800s to some degree, and they were carried into the 1900s, because of this initial observation of the horned god and combining that with the masculine deities, that's why we still know about Cernunnos today and why his legend really does survive. Now, there's a few other things that survive, especially when it comes to horned beings. There's a horned dance that still survives in England. There, of course, is the going all the way back into history with the star-car headdresses of people putting deer skulls on their head nearly 10,000 years ago. I mean, we have a lot of reference to horned gods being important. And so regardless of Cernunnos being an individual deity, when it comes to the idea of horned gods, their significance to the wilds, significance to prosperity, animals were seen as prosperity, especially when it came to the hunting-gathering times. And so the identity of a horned god obviously is something that would have been important to the ancient peoples, and that's certainly something that Margaret Murray observed as well. I want to take you inside. I want to show you the Gunderstrip Cauldron. I want to analyze it. I want to talk about it. Let's discuss it, because this is seriously one of the coolest artifacts in the world. So just giving you an idea, if you pull back here, here's the cauldron itself. And then as you get closer, there's the depiction of Cernunnos right there on the inside. It's really hard to kind of zoom in here, but you can really see the details here. It's absolutely beautiful. And then if you go around to the other side, you get the background relief of it as well. So you can really see the details here. What's interesting to me is he's actually not the center of this motif, where the other ones, clearly the gods, are centered. So you have, one god here, and then two around it. Then you go back to Cernunnos, and you have him to the right, well, to the left, and then everything else. And so the importance of the animals is just as much, if not more, to the depiction here, in my opinion. And I use that because of how much more important each of these figures is represented, given space in the dead center with other things flanking around them. You have the animals around this one as well. And then going back to Cernunnos, he's a part of the design, a part of the image, rather than being the central focus of it. Being one in communion with the nature, rather than being the god at the center of it, if that makes sense. And again, that's what we have to do when we don't have the written source material. So we have to look at these things and really analyze in comparison to the other things. And I think one of the most interesting to me is the fact that Cernunnos isn't necessarily depicted like a god in this one, but a part of nature. And I think that's really beautiful. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Amazing. Look how humans are represented. Very small. So Cernunnos is bigger than a human in comparison, but not as big as the faces of the gods. And then this is the other famous image here, what most people believe represents the Celtic afterlife, because you have the warriors marching on, you have the Carnexes there, and then you have like the well of rebirth. And again, we have a figure that more godlike in appearance, and the human small soldiers like that. This one's interesting. Other animals around a smaller figure as well. Definitely let me know what you think each of these means in the comments below. But we'll finish here with the focus of this video, Cernunnos. Amazing. Definitely one of the most beautiful pieces of artifacts in history in the world, in my opinion. Just the presence of it alone. I mean, I always get starstruck every time I come in here. feel very grateful to film and feel very grateful to share it with all of you. Yeah, this is my second time seeing it in person, and I really think there is something to the way these are depicted on the outside very differently. And as it is referenced on the wall over here, it was saying that because of where it was made, this is probably multiple pantheons. It's not just one. And it's also important to remember the people making this were not calling themselves Celtic, more than likely. You know, they didn't have these concepts. These are concepts we put on them later. And so this was made by people of a diverse background of different gods and worship and belief systems, all being featured on here, and then traveling a great distance to be offered in a bog in Denmark. Absolutely incredible. But even then, the art style is not something wholly different than a lot of the stuff featured in this museum either. Wow, look at that one. Little guy being, like, grabbed by the god figure. Wow. Truly incredible. I hope you're enjoying this as much as me. This is the stuff that gets me excited. Interesting. Look, we have, like, a dragon holding two people almost. Cernunnos, god, being of the wilds. Torque in one hand, snake in the other, cross-legged and horned, amongst the wild animals of the world. What was that guy riding a whale? Okay. Of course there was time for a sweet roll. I seriously love this country. If you've not been to Denmark, you will hear often that their sweet rolls, the Danishes, as they are known, are delicious. And it is not an inaccurate statement. They are absolutely amazing, insanely overpriced, and great with a cup of coffee. And just like the beginning of the video, look, almost everywhere you go will also have candles going. This country really is into the hygge. But we're here to talk about Cernunnos. So I hope you really enjoyed the Gundestrup Cauldron. Sorry I had to be a bit whispery in there, but I hope you understand that, like, being in a museum, you can't be very loud. It's very echoey. It's not a lot of people, so I didn't want to be too obnoxious. I really do want to hear your thoughts down below, the Gundestrup Cauldron of Cernunnos. So please put any thoughts you had on it down below. Well, I take a bite of the sweet roll. So I think all that's left to really talk about here is, what does this mean for us now? Because that's the ultimate difference with this channel. We're not just talking about history. We're not just talking about folklore and mythology. We look at what this means for us today. And so when looking at Cernunnos, obviously he has already been a god that has been heavily adapted into the New Age. Because of that work in the 1800s, because of Wicca, because of the horn god, the Lord and the Lady, and all the New Age stuff, Cernunnos has a very New Age understanding. In fact, it's probably one of the most worshipped New Age gods because of the motif of the horn god. For me, not coming into this from a Wiccan angle, coming into it from the historical angle, the ancestral, the Scandinavian lens and all this, I think the most interesting part about Cernunnos is the bridge between our two worlds. I think that's what I'm going to sit between, because here we have an ancient figure holding the snake, a symbol of transformation, a symbol of the wilds, and then the gold torque, something we see in that museum as well, all over the place. The gold torque is not something that's just to the Celtic, it's to the Danish, to the Scandinavian, to European history, to world history, the symbol of gold, the symbol of civilization. These two things being held together by the horn god. To me, Cernunnos represents that bridging of our two worlds, a bridging of the wilds, a bridging of civilization coming together. I think the horn god as a motif is an important one. Do I think Cernunnos is actually a god? Do I think you can worship Cernunnos and get a response? I think that's going to be the interesting one. I want to hear your thoughts on it too. To me, Cernunnos of all the gods is not one that is single. It's something that is innate. It's the wilds. It's the combination of civilization and the past. A look at where we came from, a symbol of prosperity, a symbol of time and change. I think ultimate Cernunnos is not necessarily a god. I think he's a symbol of who we are. We came from the wilds. We're not that far removed from our horn days. We hold in our hands transformation, the wilds and gold. We live among nature. We try to control it. To me, Cernunnos is us, humans. We wear our clothes. We adorn ourselves in the gold. But we still have horns. And I think that's ultimately why I like paganism and why I think it's still needed today in this world. It's because I think we still need to have the ability to be wild and not forget our antlered roots, to not take them off, to not fully surrender ourselves to the cities, to this creation, to the matrix. We have to live in harmony with it. I'm filming this on a camera, you're watching this on YouTube. So we have to live in balance with it, but we cannot forget these. Ultimately, to me, that's what Cernunnos means. The Gundestrup Cauldron is gorgeous. It's one of my favorite artifacts in history, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. But this is just my theories and my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down below, and I'm going to get back to my sweet roll. I've only had 24 hours here in Denmark, as I did last time as well. I've really enjoyed Copenhagen. I've really enjoyed this museum, as I always do, and I've enjoyed this conversation and working my thoughts out with you. So I hope you've enjoyed it. So now it's time for the sweet roll. So my name is Jacob Todson. Thank you for joining me for this video, and I can't wait to see you in the next one here, the wisdom of the sweet roll. Ooh.